Their formation was simple, almost elegant, for destroyers, each carrying its own weight, its own purpose, its own burden. Leading the line was the flagship Hajikase, commanded by Captain Kaju Sugiura, a firm believer in discipline and experience. Behind Hajikase came Erasure and Kawakaze, both heavily loaded with soldiers, nearly 900 troops being transported to Vela on Kalimbangra. The two troop-loaded ships moved slightly heavier in the water, their hulls sitting lower, engines straining under the dual weight of men and morale. Trailing them was Shigeru, commanded by the sharp-eyed and famously outspoken Commander Tamichi Hara, whose instincts often ran ahead of his orders. Shigeru carried no troops. She was lean, fast, and deadly, a pure escort, a sword in the hand of a formation carrying far too many lives. This was supposed to be just another run, another night slipping past American patrols. The Japanese had been moving through the Solomons like ghosts for months. Their destroyers were designed for night fighting, long, sleek, powerful, with crews trained specifically for darkness. Their optics were unmatched, their lookouts could spot a ship from miles away on nothing more than starlight, and their torpedoes, the feared Type 93 Long Lance, were the stuff of whispered legends. To Japanese commanders, the ocean at night was not an obstacle. It was home turf. But beneath that confidence was a crack, a thin, quiet one, and it came from Shigeru's bridge. Commander Hara had been uneasy for days. He warned repeatedly that using the same route, the same timetable, the same timing for the Tokyo Express was asking for trouble. The Americans had been battered early in the war, yes, but they were learning. They were adapting. They weren't the same clumsy, radar-hesitant force that had been ripped apart at Savo Island or mauled off Guadalcanal. You cannot assume incompetence forever, Hara had warned his superiors. Patterns invite death. But his caution was dismissed by Captain Sugiura, who believed strongly in past victories. After all, this route had been used dozens of times without disaster. The Americans had never successfully intercepted a Tokyo Express run in this area. Why would tonight be any different? To Sugiura, Hara's concerns sounded like paranoia. To Hara, Sugiura's confidence felt like blindness. It was an old tension within the Imperial Navy, the divide between instinct and hierarchy, between battlefield experience and doctrinal pride. But once the order was given, there was no point arguing. Japanese doctrine still trusted its night fighters, its lookouts, and its battle-tested tactics. They believed their eyes could see further than any American machine. They believed radar was unreliable, clumsy, and unworthy of comparative respect. And because they believed all that, they entered Vela Gulf completely unaware of what awaited them. Each destroyer cut through the water with a practiced rhythm. Inside their holds, troops being transported to Vela sat tightly packed, weapons slung across knees, some asleep, some whispering quietly to kill time. None of them had any idea they were minutes away from one of the most destructive ambushes of the war. To them, the threat was always from aircraft, bombers, torpedo planes, not from American destroyers, which they considered inferior at night. That assumption was about to prove fatal. Hajikase, Erasure, and Kawakaze steamed ahead at a confident 30 knots, their engines thundering through the darkness, their silhouettes blending into the low horizon. The crews on lookout scanned the faint outline of islands around them. But tonight, the air was too thick, the clouds too heavy, and the darkness too absolute. The greatest night-fighting force in the Pacific had been rendered blind, not by the enemy, but by the sky itself. And even worse, they could not know they were being watched. Far beyond their visual range, at distances no Japanese lookout could ever pierce, American SG radar had already drawn a clear picture of them. The Japanese believed the night protected them. They believed the Americans were still operating with old SC radar, which produced nothing but clutter near islands. They believed they were untouchable. But the SG radar on American destroyers was not the same. It did not see ghosts. It saw truth. Meanwhile, on Shigeru's bridge, Hara's instincts were buzzing, that uncomfortable tension in his chest that had saved him before. He felt the air was too still, the night too clean, the waters too quiet. But with Sugiura ahead of him, and Japanese doctrine insisting on confidence, he had little choice but to continue forward. The Japanese destroyer line moved deep into the Gulf, a knife gliding silently toward an enemy they didn't even know existed. Their formations were tight, their discipline sharp, but none of that mattered now. They were carrying soldiers, not hunting for a fight. Their torpedoes were ready, yes, but their expectations were wrong. And in war, wrong expectations kill faster than bullets. As their wake sliced through the dark water, the fate of nearly 1,200 men rested on old assumptions colliding with new technology. The Japanese believed their lookouts were the best in the world. They believed their tactics had crushed the Americans again and again. They believed the darkness belonged to them. But tonight, the ocean had chosen a different master. They were walking into an ambush they couldn't see, guided by confidence that had quietly turned into arrogance, and unaware that within minutes, their formation, their mission, and their doctrine would unravel in a storm of torpedoes and fire. The Japanese force was not weak. It was not untrained. It was not careless. It was simply outdated in a way they couldn't yet understand. And because of that, they were heading straight into history, unaware, unprepared, and tragically overconfident, as the silent hunters of the Pacific turned into the hunted shadows of the night. On the American side of the Pacific, the night carried a different kind of electricity. The men aboard the 6 destroyers of the U.S. task group weren't moving with the routine confidence of the Tokyo Express, they were moving with purpose sharpened by defeat, by memory, and by a newfound understanding of the battlefield. The American surface fleet had taken brutal hits in the early war, Savo Island, Tassafaranga, Cape Esperance, each loss a lesson carved into the metal of their ships and into the minds of their commanders. But tonight, that history was not a weight dragging them down. It was fuel. It was clarity. And at the center of that clarity were 6 destroyers divided into 2 lethal halves, forming a striking force unlike anything the Pacific had seen before. 3 of these, Dunlap, Craven, and Maury, formed Division A1, the sharp edge of the blade. They carried full torpedo batteries, drilled endlessly in coordinated launches, and were chosen specifically to deliver the first silent punch. Behind them came Division A2, Lang, Sterrett, and Stack, slightly different in composition. These ships carried fewer torpedoes but heavier anti-aircraft guns, making them bulkier, broader-shouldered protectors of the formation. That night, however, everyone had the same role: follow the plan with absolute precision, because a single hesitation could turn the Gulf into another American disaster. Their formation was simple, almost elegant, 4 destroyers, each carrying its own weight, its own purpose, its own burden. Leading the line was the flagship Hajikase, commanded by Captain Kaju Sugiura, a firm believer in discipline and experience. Behind Hajikase came Erasure and Kawakaze, both heavily loaded with soldiers, nearly 900 troops being transported to Vela on Columbangra. The 2 troop-loaded ships moved slightly heavier in the water, their hulls sitting lower, engines straining under the dual weight of men and morale. Trailing them was Shigyur, commanded by the sharp-eyed and famously outspoken Commander Tamichi Hara, whose instincts often ran ahead of his orders. Shigyur carried no troops. She was lean, fast, and deadly, a pure escort, a sword in the hand of a formation carrying far too many lives. This was supposed to be just another run, another night slipping past American patrols. The Japanese had been moving through the Solomons like ghosts for months. Their destroyers were designed for night fighting, long, sleek, powerful, with crews trained specifically for darkness. Their optics were unmatched, their lookouts could spot a ship from miles away on nothing more than starlight, and their torpedoes, the feared Type 93 Long Lance, were the stuff of whispered legends. To Japanese commanders, the ocean at night was not an obstacle. It was home turf. But beneath that confidence was a crack, a thin, quiet one, and it came from Shigyur's bridge. Commander Hara had been uneasy for days. He warned repeatedly that using the same route, the same timetable, the same timing for the Tokyo Express was asking for trouble. The Americans had been battered early in the war, yes, but they were learning. They were adapting. They weren't the same clumsy, radar-hesitant force that had been ripped apart at Savo Island or mauled off Guadalcanal. You cannot assume incompetence forever, Hara had warned his superiors. Patterns invite death. But his caution was dismissed by Captain Sugiura, who believed strongly in past victories. After all, this route had been used dozens of times without disaster. The Americans had never successfully intercepted a Tokyo Express run in this area. Why would tonight be any different? To Sugiura, Hara's concern sounded like paranoia. To Hara, Sugiura's confidence felt like blindness. It was an old tension within the Imperial Navy, the divide between instinct and hierarchy, between battlefield experience and doctrinal pride. But once the order was given, there was no point arguing. Japanese doctrine still trusted its night fighters, its lookouts, and its battle-tested tactics. They believed their eyes could see further than any American machine. They believed radar was unreliable, clumsy, and unworthy of comparative respect. And because they believed all that, they entered Vela Gulf completely unaware of what awaited them. Each destroyer cut through the water with a practiced rhythm. Inside their holds, troops being transported to Vela sat tightly packed, weapons slung across knees, some asleep, some whispering quietly to kill time. None of them had any idea they were minutes away from one of the most destructive ambushes of the war. To them, the threat was always from aircraft, bombers, torpedo planes, not from American destroyers, which they considered inferior at night. That assumption was about to prove fatal. Hajikes, Arisher, and Kawakaze steamed ahead at a confident 30 knots, their engines thundering through the darkness, their silhouettes blending into the low horizon. The crews on lookout scanned the faint outline of islands around them. But tonight, the air was too thick, the clouds too heavy, and the darkness too absolute. The greatest night-fighting force in the Pacific had been rendered blind, not by the enemy, but by the sky itself. And even worse, they could not know they were being watched. Far beyond their visual range, at distances no Japanese lookout could ever pierce, American SG radar had already drawn a clear picture of them. The Japanese believed the night protected them. They believed the Americans were still operating with old SC radar, which produced nothing but clutter near islands. They believed they were untouchable. But the SG radar on American destroyers was not the same. It did not see ghosts. It saw truth. Meanwhile, on Shigur's bridge, Hara's instincts were buzzing, that uncomfortable tension in his chest that had saved him before. He felt the air was too still, the night too clean, the waters too quiet. But with Sugiura ahead of him, and Japanese doctrine insisting on confidence, he had little choice but to continue forward. The Japanese destroyer line moved deep into the Gulf, a knife gliding silently toward an enemy they didn't even know existed. Their formations were tight, their discipline sharp, but none of that mattered now. They were carrying soldiers, not hunting for a fight. Their torpedoes were ready, yes, but their expectations were wrong. And in war, wrong expectations kill faster than bullets. As their wake sliced through the dark water, the fate of nearly 1,200 men rested on old assumptions colliding with new technology. The Japanese believed their lookouts were the best in the world. They believed their tactics had crushed the Americans again and again. They believed the darkness belonged to them. But tonight, the ocean had chosen a different master. They were walking into an ambush they couldn't see, guided by confidence that had quietly turned into arrogance, and unaware that within minutes, their formation, their mission, and their doctrine would unravel in a storm of torpedoes and fire. The Japanese force was not weak. It was not untrained. It was not careless. It was simply outdated in a way they couldn't yet understand. And because of that, they were heading straight into history, unaware, unprepared, and tragically overconfident, as the silent hunters of the Pacific turned into the hunted shadows of the night. On the American side of the Pacific, the night carried a different kind of electricity. The men aboard the 6 destroyers of the U.S. task group weren't moving with the routine confidence of the Tokyo Express, they were moving with purpose sharpened by defeat, by memory, and by a newfound understanding of the battlefield. The American surface fleet had taken brutal hits in the early war, Savo Island, Tassafaronga, Cape Esperance, each loss a lesson carved into the metal of their ships and into the minds of their commanders. But tonight, that history was not a weight dragging them down. It was fuel. It was clarity. And at the center of that clarity were 6 destroyers divided into 2 lethal halves, forming a striking force unlike anything the Pacific had seen before. 3 of these, Dunlap, Craven, and Maury, formed Division A1, the sharp edge of the blade. They carried full torpedo batteries, drilled endlessly in coordinated launches, and were chosen specifically to deliver the first silent punch. Behind them came Division A2, Lang, Sterrett, and Stack, slightly different in composition. These ships carried fewer torpedoes but heavier anti-aircraft guns, making them bulkier, broader-shouldered protectors of the formation. That night, however, everyone had the same role: follow the plan with absolute precision, because a single hesitation could turn the Gulf into another American disaster. If the Japanese ships sailed on old doctrines refined by experience, the Americans sailed on new doctrine carved out of desperation and innovation. Their trump card was not in their optics or their eyes. It was something deeper, something humming quietly behind steel plates, glowing green in compact rooms where men hunched over screens that most senior officers still didn't trust. It was the SG microwave radar. All 6 destroyers were equipped with this new technology, a system so advanced that many of the men using it still considered it semi-magical. Unlike the older SC radar, which smeared island coastlines into indistinct blobs, the SG radar drew sharp shapes, clean distances, and hard truth onto a circular screen. To the trained operator, the Pacific at night wasn't darkness, it was geometry. It was math. It was clarity. And for the first time in the Pacific War, destroyers weren't going into battle under the command of cruisers barking orders down the line. They were on their own, with radar as their eyes and the Combat Information Center, the CIC, as their brain. Inside each CIC, the atmosphere was intense and focused. Radar operators whispered ranges and bearings like surgeons calling out vitals during an operation. Officers leaned over plotting tables, pencils moving in precise arcs as they tracked the Japanese formation before the Japanese even knew they were being followed. The CIC wasn't glamorous. It wasn't loud. It wasn't heroic looking. But in this new world of night combat, it was the throne room of battle. And the men inside it, many of them young, anonymous, and sworn to secrecy, were weaving victory into existence one radar sweep at a time. The American fleet had learned the hard way that eyes alone were not enough. At Savo Island, Japanese destroyers had vanished and reappeared like ghosts. At Tassafaronga, the long lance torpedo had torn through American cruisers before lookouts even had time to shout warnings. The ocean at night belonged to Japan, until radar changed the nature of darkness itself. And no one understood that transformation better than Rear Admiral Arleigh Burke, whose tactical philosophy now guided the force like an invisible hand. Burke had been one of the first to realize how radar could change everything. He openly pushed a radical idea: attack first, in silence, using radar alone to guide torpedoes, and only fire guns once the torpedoes were already slicing through the water. It was the exact opposite of the old American habit of firing guns first and torpedoes later. It was bold. It was risky. It terrified traditional commanders. But it worked. Burke's successes had forced the higher command to reconsider, and tonight, his doctrine wasn't just theory. It was the blueprint for victory. Rear Admiral Wilkinson had chosen Commander Frederick Moosbrugger to execute this new style of warfare. Moose wasn't flashy, he was precise. He chose simplicity over bravado, clarity over chaos. And when he gathered his officers for the planning conference, he laid out a strategy that depended entirely on trust in radar, trust in their training, and trust in each other. Division A1 would be the silent killers, slipping in close, firing a wave of torpedoes under the cover of night. Division A2 would follow, crossing the Japanese formation and unleashing gunfire once the torpedoes hit. The timing had to be perfect. The radar plots had to match exactly. There was no room for improvisation. Every ship, every division, every officer was a gear in a delicately engineered clock that would either smash the Japanese force in minutes, or break itself. The mood on the American destroyers reflected that tension. Sailors moved with a quiet seriousness, their boots thudding softly on steel decks. Officers leaned over railings, staring into the blackness, knowing that somewhere out there 4 Japanese destroyers were cutting through the same darkness, unaware they were already being hunted. Below deck, torpedo men checked gyro settings and firing timers. Engineers listened to the heartbeat of the engines, waiting for the moment when full power would be demanded. Radar operators adjusted gain knobs with fingertips trained for subtlety rather than strength. There was no sense of routine here, no, just another night. The Americans weren't delivering troops. They weren't running a supply line. They were preparing for the first pure destroyer night intercept of the entire Pacific War. And they knew it. Every man understood the stakes. The Pacific had changed. The war had changed. Technology had changed. But the Japanese still believed the night belonged to them. That belief made them predictable. Predictability made them vulnerable. And vulnerability was exactly what Moose planned to exploit. The Americans moved silently, their wakes barely glowing, their stacks whispering exhaust instead of roaring it. They were not here to be seen. They were here to rewrite the rules. On this night, 6 American destroyers sailed not as separate ships but as a single, evolving machine, a machine powered by radar, fed by intelligence, sharpened by defeat, and driven by a commander who understood that this battle wasn't just another engagement. It was a test. A test of whether technology could triumph over tradition. Whether precision could defeat instinct. Whether the Americans could seize the night from the Japanese at last. And as they slipped deeper into Vela Gulf, following the steady sweep of the SG radar like a lighthouse that only they could see, every man aboard knew the truth. Tonight wasn't just a mission. It was a turning point waiting to happen. On the night of August 6, 1943, the stage was set for a transformative moment in naval warfare. At 2,333 hours, USS Dunlap, under the command of Commander Frederick Moosbrugger, detected 4 Japanese destroyers at an astonishing 29,500 yards. This was a rare sight. The Japanese, confident in their traditional night fighting skills, had no effective radar to warn them of the approaching American force. The stakes could not have been higher. Within just 17 minutes, 3 of these enemy destroyers would be destroyed, a decisive action that would forever alter the doctrine of night combat in the Pacific. For the Americans, this engagement represented more than a single battle, it was a testing ground for a technological and tactical revolution. The Japanese force that night consisted of 4 destroyers, each with its own specific role. The flagship Hajikes, under Captain Kaju Sugiura, led the formation, while Erasure and Kawakaze carried additional troops bound for Vela on Kolombangara. The smallest of the group, Shigure, was tasked purely with escort duty. Collectively, these ships transported approximately 900 soldiers, conducting what the Japanese called a Tokyo Express run, a routine mission along a route that had proven successful in previous operations. Despite warnings from experienced commanders like Tamichi Hara aboard Shigure, who cautioned that repeating the same routes would invite disaster, Sugiura dismissed these concerns. The Japanese remained reliant on their optical night fighting skills, confident in the expertise of their lookouts and the reach of their long lance torpedoes. Opposing them, the American force represented a new generation of naval power, both in technology and doctrine. 6 destroyers were organized into 2 divisions. Division A-1, comprising Dunlap, Craven, and Mori, carried full torpedo batteries, while Division A-2, consisting of Lang, Sterrett, and Stack, was loaded with heavier anti-aircraft armament but reduced torpedoes. What distinguished these ships from their predecessors was their cutting-edge SG microwave radar, capable of detecting enemy vessels at distances previously unimaginable. For the first time, American destroyers were operating independently from cruisers, relying on radar guidance to achieve tactical surprise. Previous defeats in night battles, such as those at Savo Island and Guadalcanal, had highlighted the limitations of U.S. tactics and the distrust of radar. Now, however, the SG radar offered clarity in the cluttered waters of the Solomon Islands, allowing commanders to act with confidence before visual contact was possible. The earlier failure of U.S. radar stemmed primarily from the limitations of SC radar systems, which operated on a 1.5-meter wavelength. These radars produced low-resolution, blob, readings, which became nearly meaningless amidst the island's complex coastlines. As a result, American forces often required visual confirmation before engaging the enemy, which left them vulnerable to the far-reaching long-lance torpedoes of the Japanese, capable of striking at ranges up to 40,000 yards. Until 1943, Japanese night lookouts and torpedo technology had allowed them to attack unseen, maintaining a near-complete dominance in nocturnal engagements. Rear Admiral Arleigh Burke emerged as a key figure in the shift toward modern night combat tactics. He emphasized radar-first strategies, advocating for silent torpedo attacks guided by radar rather than relying on gunfire or visual detection. Torpedoes were to be launched before gunfire revealed American positions, minimizing the risk of counterattack. Although senior commanders initially resisted these ideas, wary of departing from traditional visual-based tactics, Burke's success forced a reconsideration of established doctrine. For the mission at Vela Gulf, Rear Admiral Wilkinson tasked Moosbrugger with leading the first purely destroyer-based night intercept in the Pacific. The planning conference emphasized the necessity of precise radar tracking and coordinated execution. Division A-1 was designated as the torpedo striking force, while Division A-2 was set to cross the enemy's T, providing gunfire support once the torpedoes had struck. The concept of combat information centers, CICs, became vital. Each ship had to follow identical radar solutions to ensure a synchronized attack. Environmental conditions that night were ideal for radar operations but treacherous for visual observation. An overcast sky and moonless darkness reduced visibility to less than 1,000 yards. The Americans deployed in two columns, spaced 500 yards apart and moving at speeds between 25 and 30 knots. Radar readings revealed the islands sharply, while the Gulf itself remained clear, providing a perfect avenue for a covert approach. At 2,333 hours, Dunlap's radar made contact with the Japanese force at 29,500 yards, with Craven and Maury quickly confirming speed and heading, 30 knots, matching pre-mission intelligence perfectly. The Americans closed the distance methodically, passing ranges of 27,000, 20,000, and 15,000 yards, at which point torpedo crews prepared for launch. At 7,500 yards, the order was given. Dunlap, Craven, and Maury fired a total of 24 torpedoes in just 63 seconds, immediately turning away at flank speed. The impact was swift and catastrophic. By 23:46 hours, Hajike's was engulfed in flames, Arisher crippled, and Kawakazi's magazine had detonated, sinking her almost instantly. Division A-2 then opened fire, the flashes illuminating the Gulf, but the Japanese had already suffered irrecoverable losses. Only Shiger managed to escape, firing 8 torpedoes that all missed. She withdrew at high speed, leaving behind a scene of devastation. The battle lasted a mere 26 minutes, yet its outcome demonstrated the lethal effectiveness of radar-guided night combat. Casualties were starkly one-sided, one non-combat injury on the American side versus approximately 1,210 Japanese soldiers and sailors killed. The Japanese never fully understood the assault. None of the 4 ships had functioning radar capable of detecting the incoming Americans at such ranges. Their Type 22 radar was inferior, and reliance on visual confirmation rendered lookouts ineffective in the darkness. This engagement validated the American approach. The SG radar had proven itself as a decisive tool. Following the battle, reports from Wilkinson led to fleet-wide adoption of radar-guided torpedo tactics. Subsequent engagements in August and September saw more Japanese destroyers sunk under similar conditions, reversing the previous kill ratios in the Pacific. The long-term influence of this engagement extended beyond a single battle. Radar became the primary targeting tool, and CICs emerged as the nerve centers of destroyer operations. By 1944–45, the Japanese surface fleet had lost its night fighting edge completely. Technology and doctrine had become intertwined, commanders had to trust the radar, and skilled operators, though largely uncredited, became indispensable to naval success. Key figures' fates varied. Moosbrugger rose through the ranks to vice admiral, Hara survived to write about his experiences, and Sugiura was eventually killed aboard the cruiser Haguro. SG radar, the backbone of U.S. destroyers until the end of the war, was mass-produced, though few units survive today. Museums and history often overlook the critical role of CIC operators and radar crews, yet their contributions reshaped naval warfare. The battle in Vela Gulf demonstrated that doctrine, technology, and human skill together could overturn previously unchallenged dominance. This engagement ended Japanese supremacy in night battles after 2 years, permanently changing naval strategy and tactics, and cemented the legacy of radar as the decisive factor in modern naval combat. The battle in Vela Gulf on the night of August 6, 1943, represented more than a single naval engagement. It was the dawn of a new era in night warfare. At 2,333 hours, USS Dunlap, under Commander Frederick Moosbrugger, detected 4 Japanese destroyers at an incredible 29,500 yards. This was a moment the Japanese could never have anticipated. Their reliance on traditional optical night fighting techniques left them blind to the approaching American force. The stakes were monumental. Within just 17 minutes, 3 of these destroyers would be destroyed, marking one of the most lopsided night victories in the Pacific and signaling a decisive shift in naval doctrine. The battle was not merely a demonstration of American firepower, but a test of a radically new way of conducting night operations, combining technology, tactics, and human ingenuity. The Japanese force that night consisted of 4 destroyers with distinct roles. Hajikase, the flagship commanded by Captain Kaju Sugiura, led the formation. Arashur and Kawakaze carried roughly 900 troops intended for Vela on Kalimbangara, while Shigure served purely as an escort. This mission was a routine Tokyo Express run, using a route that had previously succeeded without incident. Nevertheless, experience warned of potential disaster. Commander Tomichi Hara aboard Shigure cautioned against repeated routing, recognizing the increasing risk of American interception. Yet Sugiura, confident in his crew and past successes, dismissed the warning. Japanese night doctrine depended heavily on expert lookouts and the reach of their long lance torpedoes, which far outranged American counterparts. They believed that skill and experience would secure victory in darkness, underestimating the transformational power of radar-guided tactics. The American destroyer force represented the cutting edge of naval warfare. 6 destroyers, divided into 2 groups, prepared to execute a mission that had never before been attempted. Division A-1, including Dunlap, Craven, and Mori, carried full torpedo batteries and served as the striking force. Division A-2, with Lang, Sterrett, and Stack, carried heavier anti-aircraft guns but reduced torpedo loads, designed to provide fire support and cross the enemy's T. Unlike previous engagements, these destroyers were fully equipped with SG microwave radar, capable of detecting enemy ships at distances far beyond visual range. For the first time, American destroyers operated independently from cruisers, relying on technology to achieve tactical surprise and precision. The SG radar represented a radical improvement over earlier SC models, which had been limited by poor resolution and interference from island clutter. Previously, radar readings often required visual confirmation, leaving American forces vulnerable to the long-range long-lance torpedoes. Until this point, Japanese forces had dominated night engagements, using superior torpedoes and the cover of darkness to strike unseen. The adoption of SG radar, combined with the development of effective combat information centers, CICs, allowed American commanders to coordinate precise attacks without ever seeing their targets, revolutionizing night combat. Rear Admiral Arleigh Burke's tactical principles were at the heart of this revolution. He advocated for radar-first attacks, emphasizing silent torpedo launches guided solely by radar data before gunfire revealed the American position. This approach marked a fundamental departure from traditional doctrine, where visual sighting and gunnery had dominated. Although senior commanders initially resisted, Burke's successes forced a re-evaluation of entrenched ideas, proving that trust in technology could overcome experience and intuition. Moosbrugger's assignment for the Vela Gulf operation was both historic and experimental. Rear Admiral Wilkinson's orders tasked him with leading the first pure destroyer night intercept in the Pacific, requiring meticulous planning and flawless execution. The strategy was straightforward yet daring. Division A1 would strike with torpedoes, while Division A2 would provide crossfire support. All ships had to synchronize radar data precisely, with the CIC functioning as the nerve center for communication and guidance. Environmental conditions were ideal for radar operations. A moonless, overcast night reduced visibility to less than 1,000 yards, giving the Americans a technological advantage while nullifying Japanese optical skills. Two columns of destroyers, spaced 500 yards apart and moving at 25 to 30 knots, advanced into the Gulf, radar revealing the islands clearly while keeping the Gulf itself open and unobstructed. At 2,333 hours, the American radar operators detected the Japanese force at 29,500 yards. Speed and course confirmation from Craven and Maury matched intelligence predictions perfectly. The enemy moved at 30 knots. The Americans closed in methodically, tracking ranges of 27,000, 20,000, and 15,000 yards, at which point torpedo crews prepared for launch. At 7,500 yards, the torpedo salvo began. Dunlap, Craven, and Maury fired a total of 24 torpedoes in just 63 seconds before executing immediate evasive maneuvers. Within minutes, the results were catastrophic. Hajikase was ablaze, Arisher crippled, and Kawakazi destroyed by a magazine explosion. Division A2 followed with gunfire, illuminating the Gulf, but the Japanese had already suffered irreversible losses. Only Shigeru managed to escape, her counterattack ineffective, highlighting the overwhelming advantage provided by radar-guided coordination. The aftermath of the battle highlighted both the efficiency and lethality of the new tactics. The entire engagement lasted only 26 minutes, yet it was the most one-sided night victory for the United States up to that point. American casualties were minimal, a single non-combat injury, while Japanese losses numbered around 1,210 soldiers and sailors. The Japanese never fully grasped the nature of the attack. Their lack of functional radar and reliance on visual confirmation left them blind to the approaching Americans. The victory validated the SG radar, and subsequent reports from Rear Admiral Wilkinson led to fleet-wide adoption of radar-guided torpedo tactics. Over the following weeks, multiple Japanese destroyer losses reversed prior kill ratios, establishing American dominance in night combat. The long-term impact of the Vela Gulf engagement was profound. Radar became the centerpiece of naval operations, and the CIC emerged as the critical nerve center for coordination and targeting. By 1944-45, the Japanese surface fleet had lost the initiative in night battles entirely. Commanders learned to trust technology and to integrate human skill with mechanical advantage, creating a synergy that transformed naval warfare. Key figures emerged from the battle with lasting legacies. Moosbrugger rose to vice admiral, guiding further radar-driven victories. Hara survived to document Japanese perspective in his book Japanese Destroyer Captain. Sugiura perished later aboard the cruiser Higuro, a victim of the very tactics he had underestimated. SG radar, produced in nearly 1,000 units, became the backbone of U.S. destroyers until the end of the war. Few units survive today, and the contribution of radar operators remains largely unrecognized, yet their role was decisive in reshaping naval doctrine. The Vela Gulf battle demonstrated the combined power of technology, planning, and trust in innovation. It marked the end of Japanese night supremacy after 2 years of dominance, permanently altering the tactics, strategy, and technology of modern naval warfare. Radar was no longer auxiliary, it became central to victory, ensuring that American forces would dominate night combat in the Pacific for the remainder of the war. The night of August 6, 1943, began as an ordinary patrol for USS Dunlap and the rest of Task Group 31.2, yet it quickly became a turning point in naval history. At precisely 2,333 hours, Dunlap's SG radar picked up 4 Japanese destroyers at an incredible 29,500 yards. Commander Frederick Moosbrugger immediately recognized the opportunity. This was a rare chance to test the full potential of radar-guided night combat. The Japanese ships, traveling along a routine Tokyo Express run, were unaware of the danger approaching. Overcast skies and the absence of moonlight further concealed the American force while providing ideal conditions for radar. What followed in the next half hour would demonstrate a lethal combination of preparation, technology, and tactical daring. The Japanese formation was compact but significant. The flagship Hajikes, under Captain Kaju Sugiura, led with confidence, while Arleigh and Kawakaze carried approximately 900 troops destined for Vela on Kolombangara. Shigeru, commanded by Tamichi Hara, maintained escort duties. Japanese doctrine relied heavily on expert lookouts and the long reach of their long-lance torpedoes. Though Hara warned that repeated routes invited disaster, Sugiura's faith in traditional night fighting skills led him to dismiss the advice. The Japanese had successfully executed similar runs before, and they underestimated the new radar-based tactics that the Americans were about to unleash. The American formation was organized for precision and lethality. Division A1, comprising Dunlap, Craven, and Maury, served as the torpedo strike group, while Division A2, with Lang, Sterrett, and Stack, was designated to provide gunfire support and to cross the enemy's T once the torpedoes were in the water. The SG radar was the American secret weapon, capable of detecting ships at ranges far beyond visual recognition. This advantage allowed the destroyers to operate independently from cruisers, relying on radar tracking rather than visual sighting. Each ship's Combat Information Center, CIC, became a critical node, coordinating movements and ensuring the torpedo salvo would strike with deadly precision. As the Americans closed the distance, tension aboard each vessel was palpable. The radar operators worked silently, reporting ranges and headings with calm urgency. At 27,000 yards, the crews began torpedo preparation, tracking the enemy's speed at 30 knots, a perfect match with intelligence predictions. At 20,000 yards, final firing solutions were calculated. At 15,000 yards, every torpedo tube was loaded and ready. The crews moved with precision honed through rigorous training, aware that a single misstep could compromise the element of surprise. The coordination between the ships was seamless, a testament to the meticulous planning and trust in technology that defined this operation. When the range closed to 7,500 yards, Commander Moosbrugger gave the order. Dunlap, Craven, and Maury unleashed a simultaneous torpedo salvo, 24 torpedoes launched in just 63 seconds. The destroyers immediately turned away at flank speed, disappearing into the darkness to evade any potential Japanese counterattack. Within moments, chaos engulfed the enemy formation. Hajikes erupted in flames, the flagship's bridge and forward sections destroyed by the concentrated torpedo impact. Arleigh was crippled, her troop transport capacity effectively neutralized, while Kawakaze suffered a catastrophic magazine explosion that sank the ship almost instantly. Only Shigeru, positioned slightly aft and at an angle, managed to escape, firing 8 torpedoes in a desperate counterattack that missed entirely. The human element of the battle was stark. Sailors aboard the American destroyers worked in tense silence, relying on instruments rather than sight to determine the outcome. Torpedo crews felt the vibrations of their own launches reverberate through the decks, while radar operators tracked explosions that were invisible to the naked eye. Across the Gulf, Japanese sailors and soldiers were thrown into sudden panic, alarms blaring and fire spreading rapidly through the wooden decks and troop compartments. Within minutes, the battle had reached its decisive moments, leaving survivors scrambling for life amidst burning wreckage and exploding magazines. The disparity in casualties was striking. The Americans suffered only 1 non-combat injury, while the Japanese losses totaled approximately 1,210 personnel. Division A2 now entered the fray. With the enemy largely incapacitated, Lang, Sterrett, and Stack opened fire. Gun flashes briefly illuminated the Gulf, revealing the full scope of the destruction wrought by the torpedoes. The Japanese, finally recognizing the presence of the Americans, were already beyond the point of recovery. Shigeru's escape highlighted both the limitations of Japanese night doctrine and the overwhelming effectiveness of radar-guided coordination. The entire engagement lasted a mere 26 minutes, yet it demonstrated a level of tactical efficiency that would redefine future naval operations. The aftermath of the battle revealed the true significance of this encounter. The Japanese had no functioning radar capable of detecting American ships at such ranges. Their reliance on visual confirmation and traditional lookouts rendered them effectively blind to the approaching threat. In contrast, the Americans had leveraged technology, rigorous planning, and human skill to execute a near-perfect strike. The battle validated SG radar as a decisive instrument in naval warfare, leading to fleet-wide adoption of radar-guided torpedo tactics. Subsequent engagements in August and September 1943 saw additional Japanese destroyers destroyed under similar conditions, reversing previously unfavorable kill ratios and establishing U.S. superiority in night combat. This engagement also had profound long-term consequences. Radar became the central targeting tool, and combat information centers were recognized as essential for operational success. By 1944-45, the Japanese surface fleet had lost its initiative in night battles completely. Commanders were forced to integrate technology with traditional seamanship, creating a synergy between man and machine that became the hallmark of American naval operations. Key figures from the battle cemented their legacies. Moosbrugger rose to vice admiral, leading more radar-based victories. Tomichi Hara survived to document the Japanese perspective in his book Japanese Destroyer Captain, and Captain Sugiura was eventually killed aboard the cruiser Haguro, a victim of tactics he had underestimated. The Battle of Vela Gulf also highlighted the often overlooked contributions of radar operators and CIC crews. These men, largely uncredited in historical accounts, were crucial to the mission's success. Their training, precision, and trust in the new technology allowed the Americans to execute an operation that would have been impossible relying solely on traditional visual tactics. SG radar, produced in nearly 1,000 units during the war, became the backbone of U.S. destroyers, enabling dominance in nocturnal operations across the Pacific. Although few units survive today, their impact on naval strategy and tactics remains undeniable. Ultimately, the night of August 6, 1943, demonstrated the transformative power of technology, planning, and human skill. A meticulously coordinated attack, executed with precision and aided by radar, ended Japanese night supremacy after 2 years, permanently reshaping naval warfare. The Vela Gulf engagement proved that battles could be won without ever seeing the enemy, that doctrine and technology must evolve together, and that innovation, when trusted and properly implemented, could achieve decisive results. The bravery and skill of the sailors, combined with the revolutionary capabilities of SG radar, ensured that this brief but pivotal encounter would resonate throughout the remainder of the Pacific campaign. The Battle of Vela Gulf on August 6, 1943, did more than demonstrate the effectiveness of radar-guided torpedo attacks. It reshaped the strategic landscape of naval warfare in the Pacific. The Americans' swift and decisive victory over the Japanese destroyer formation sent shockwaves through both fleets, illustrating that technological superiority, combined with disciplined tactics, could overturn years of Japanese dominance in night combat. The Japanese, who had long relied on expert lookouts, optical targeting, and the range of their long lance torpedoes, now faced a reality in which sight alone was no longer sufficient. Radar had become the new arbiter of success, and Vela Gulf was the proof. In the immediate aftermath, the United States Navy took careful note of the battle's outcomes. Reports circulated rapidly, emphasizing the critical role of SG radar, coordinated torpedo strikes, and the effective use of combat information centers, CICs, to synchronize multiple ships in complex maneuvers. The American command realized that this operation had validated the doctrinal shift advocated by innovators like Rear Admiral Arleigh Burke. Radar could now be trusted as the primary targeting tool, allowing destroyers to operate independently and strike with precision even in complete darkness. This understanding prompted rapid integration of these practices across the fleet, fundamentally altering how night operations were conducted in the Pacific. Japanese Naval Command, in contrast, struggled to comprehend the loss. The 4 destroyers involved had no radar capable of detecting the approaching Americans at long range, and their reliance on visual confirmation left them blind to the threat. The destruction of Hajaques, Arashir, and Kawakaze, along with the escape of Shigeru, highlighted both the vulnerability inherent in outdated doctrine and the deadly consequences of underestimating technological innovation. Japanese officers like Tamichi Hara recognized the implications but were unable to effect meaningful change. Subsequent engagements revealed that unless the Japanese had a numerical advantage, night battles were increasingly risky, forcing them to adopt a more cautious posture and ceding initiative to the Americans. The battle also had profound implications for fleet-wide tactics. Radar-guided torpedo attacks and the use of CICs were rapidly standardized. By coordinating multiple ships through centralized information, commanders could execute attacks with unprecedented precision, reducing reliance on individual skill alone. This technological and tactical synergy proved decisive in later engagements. In August and September 1943, additional Japanese destroyers were sunk under similar conditions, confirming the effectiveness of the approach and reversing the unfavorable kill ratios that had previously characterized night combat in the Pacific. The Americans had not only won a single battle but had initiated a strategic transformation that would persist through the remainder of the war. SG radar, the technology at the heart of this shift, became the backbone of U.S. destroyer operations. Nearly 1,000 units were produced, deployed widely, and became essential to fleet operations. Few of these systems survive today, yet their influence was decisive. The radar allowed operators to detect enemy vessels at ranges far beyond what human eyes could manage, while the CIC acted as the operational brain, translating raw data into actionable decisions in real time. This integration of technology, human skill, and doctrine created a force multiplier that transformed the effectiveness of the American Navy at night. Battles that might previously have been high-risk ventures now became calculated operations, capable of producing overwhelming results with minimal casualties. The strategic consequences extended beyond the immediate operational environment. By demonstrating the lethal effectiveness of radar-guided attacks, the Americans forced the Japanese to reconsider the viability of traditional night operations. The once dominant Japanese surface fleet began avoiding night engagements unless numerical superiority was assured, and this tactical shift provided the U.S. Navy with greater freedom to control sea lanes, conduct supply operations, and prepare for larger offensives in the Solomon Islands and beyond. The psychological impact of radar-driven victories cannot be understated. American forces gained confidence in their new tactics, while Japanese morale and tactical certainty were eroded. Key figures from the battle continued to shape the naval landscape. Commander Moosbrugger's leadership and successful execution of radar-guided operations earned him promotion to vice admiral, and he later oversaw further victories that relied on similar principles. Tamichi Hara survived the war and documented the Japanese perspective in his book Japanese Destroyer Captain, offering insight into the tactical and doctrinal limitations that contributed to the defeat. Captain Sugiura, who had dismissed Hara's warnings, was later killed aboard the cruiser Haguro, struck down by radar-guided British destroyers. These fates underscore the human dimension of technological evolution. Leadership, foresight, and adaptability could determine survival in an era of rapid change. The Battle of Vela Gulf also highlighted a broader historical truth: innovation often relies on unsung contributors. Radar operators and CIC crews, largely overlooked in popular histories, were essential to the victory. Their ability to interpret data, maintain coordination, and execute complex tactical maneuvers allowed the Americans to leverage their technological advantage fully. Without their precision and training, even the most advanced radar systems would have been ineffective. The integration of human skill with mechanical innovation became a defining feature of modern naval operations and set a standard for future conflicts. In the long term, the legacy of Vela Gulf extended beyond the Pacific War. Radar and centralized combat coordination influenced naval strategy globally, emphasizing the need for technological integration, rigorous training, and doctrinal evolution. The battle demonstrated that victory in modern warfare was no longer a matter of numbers or brute force alone, it required mastery of emerging technologies and the foresight to integrate them effectively into operational planning. Lessons learned in the Solomons informed subsequent campaigns in the Philippines, Okinawa, and the broader Pacific theater, ensuring that American forces maintained an advantage in both technology and tactics. In conclusion, the engagement at Vela Gulf marked a turning point not just tactically, but strategically. Radar-guided torpedo attacks, precise coordination through CICs, and the effective use of new technology created a force capable of decisively overcoming a previously dominant opponent. The Americans proved that innovation, when trusted and correctly implemented, could redefine the rules of naval engagement. The Japanese, unable to adapt quickly, lost their night fighting supremacy, fundamentally shifting the balance of power in the Pacific. Vela Gulf stands as a testament to the transformative power of technology, leadership, and coordinated human effort, ensuring that future generations recognize both the innovation and the individuals who made such victories possible. The night of August 6, 1943, in Vela Gulf, marked a turning point in the Pacific War and in the history of naval combat. What began as a routine patrol quickly evolved into a demonstration of how technology, planning, and human skill could reshape the outcome of battle. USS Dunlap, under Commander Frederick Moosbrugger, detected the Japanese destroyer formation at 29,500 yards, a range unimaginable for visual sight alone. The Japanese, confident in their traditional night fighting expertise, had no functioning radar capable of detecting the Americans. Within 26 minutes, 3 of their destroyers were destroyed, a staggering testament to the effectiveness of radar-guided night combat. For the sailors aboard both fleets, the events of that night were surreal, for one side, a demonstration of lethal precision, for the other, a sudden, devastating calamity. The engagement showcased the transformation of naval doctrine. The Japanese, who had long relied on expert lookouts, optical targeting, and the reach of long-lance torpedoes, were suddenly at a technological disadvantage. Their traditional skills, which had won battles and reinforced confidence in their doctrine, were now insufficient. Meanwhile, the Americans, who had suffered repeated defeats in earlier night engagements such as Savo Island and Guadalcanal, finally leveraged the power of SG radar. This technology allowed them to detect, track, and strike the enemy without visual confirmation, fundamentally changing the calculus of night combat. The use of Combat Information Centers, CICs, to coordinate multiple ships created a new operational paradigm, where information flow and decision-making became as critical as firepower itself. The human dimension of the battle cannot be overstated. On American ships, radar operators and CIC personnel worked with calm precision, translating electronic signals into tactical decisions in real time. Torpedo crews waited tensely, knowing that the success of the mission depended on exact timing and coordination. On the Japanese side, sailors and soldiers faced chaos and confusion, unable to respond effectively to attacks they could not see or anticipate. The destruction of Hajikes, Arashir, and Kawakaze, along with the escape of Shigeru, demonstrated the deadly consequences of underestimating innovation and failing to adapt doctrine to new realities. The disparity in casualties, one non-combat injury for the Americans versus over 1,200 Japanese killed, emphasized both the efficiency of the American approach and the human cost of technological lag. The immediate aftermath of the engagement reinforced the strategic importance of radar and coordinated operations. Reports from Rear Admiral Wilkinson highlighted the decisive role of SG radar and the necessity of integrating technological capability with disciplined crew performance. This validation led to fleet-wide adoption of radar-guided torpedo tactics, fundamentally altering the approach to night operations across the Pacific. Subsequent engagements in August and September 1943, in which additional Japanese destroyers were sunk, confirmed the effectiveness of these tactics and reversed previously unfavorable kill ratios. American forces now operated with confidence, while the Japanese increasingly avoided night battles unless they held a clear numerical advantage. The broader implications of Vela Gulf extended beyond tactical success. The battle demonstrated that mastery of technology and integration of information systems were as crucial as numerical strength or individual skill. Radar allowed commanders to make decisions with unprecedented situational awareness, while CICs provided centralized coordination, ensuring that complex attacks could be executed flawlessly. These innovations became standard practice across the fleet, influencing subsequent campaigns in the Solomons, the Philippines, and the broader Pacific theater. By the end of the war, radar and CIC-based operations were recognized as indispensable tools in modern naval warfare, reshaping how battles were fought and won. The legacy of the battle also highlighted the contributions of individuals whose efforts were often overlooked. The radar operators, CIC personnel, and torpedo crews who executed these operations under tense, dangerous conditions played a critical role in achieving victory. Their skill, discipline, and trust in technology were essential to the success of the mission, yet many remained unrecognized in public accounts. Similarly, leaders like Commander Moosbrugger demonstrated the importance of vision, decisiveness, and the willingness to embrace new methods, while Japanese commanders like Tamichi Hara, who recognized the dangers too late, illustrated the perils of rigid adherence to outdated doctrine. Vela Gulf also had long-term strategic consequences. The Japanese surface fleet, previously dominant in night operations, lost its initiative and ability to conduct surprise attacks. The Americans, leveraging technology and doctrine, gained the operational advantage in the Solomon Islands and across the Pacific. By demonstrating that battles could be won without ever seeing the enemy, the engagement redefined expectations of night combat and reinforced the principle that innovation, when trusted and properly applied, could decisively shift the balance of power. The integration of radar, precision planning, and disciplined execution became a template for future naval operations, ensuring continued American success in subsequent campaigns. The battle further underscored the evolving relationship between technology and human skill. Radar was not merely a tool, it was a force multiplier, amplifying the effectiveness of well-trained crews and capable commanders. The synergy between human decision-making and electronic detection proved decisive, marking a shift in the very nature of warfare. By trusting technology while maintaining rigorous operational discipline, American forces were able to execute maneuvers and attacks that had previously been impossible. This combination of skill, innovation, and foresight established a standard that would influence naval operations for decades to come. Finally, the story of Vela Gulf serves as a reminder of the countless unsung contributors to military success. From radar operators to CIC teams, their expertise and courage ensured that technology could be translated into effective action. The battle not only ended Japanese dominance in night fighting but also cemented the importance of innovation, training, and coordination in modern warfare. It proved that victory required more than numbers or firepower, it demanded adaptability, precision, and the willingness to embrace new methods. For future generations, the lessons of Vela Gulf remain a testament to how technology, when trusted and properly integrated, can redefine the battlefield. In conclusion, the engagement at Vela Gulf was far more than a fleeting moment of tactical brilliance. It was a strategic, technological, and human milestone that reshaped naval warfare. Radar-guided torpedoes, centralized information systems, and disciplined execution allowed American forces to dominate an area previously controlled by the Japanese. The battle validated new doctrines, influenced fleet-wide tactics, and underscored the critical importance of technological trust and operational coordination. Above all, it highlighted the bravery, skill, and ingenuity of those who operated in the shadows, ensuring that their contributions, though often unseen, would forever alter the course of history. Vela Gulf stands as a lasting testament to the power of innovation, the value of preparedness, and the enduring human spirit in the crucible of war. The Battle of Vela Gulf on August 6, 1943, left an indelible mark not only on the Pacific War but on the broader evolution of naval strategy. While the immediate outcome had showcased the effectiveness of radar-guided torpedo attacks, the long-term significance extended far beyond a single engagement. The battle became a benchmark for how technology could reshape doctrine, how disciplined coordination could amplify force, and how human skill remained indispensable even in an age of electronic detection. For historians, military strategists, and naval officers alike, Vela Gulf provided a living case study of innovation triumphing over entrenched practice. One of the most remarkable aspects of the engagement was how it highlighted the interplay between technology and human agency. The Americans had access to SG radar, a system that allowed detection at ranges far exceeding visual sight. However, technology alone would not have ensured victory. Radar operators meticulously tracked the enemy, reporting precise locations and movement data to CICs, where commanders like Moosbrugger interpreted the information and made split-second tactical decisions. Torpedo crews executed their orders with precision, launching a salvo that struck 3 Japanese destroyers within minutes. Every link in this chain, technology, data interpretation, command decision, and execution, was critical. The battle demonstrated that technological advantage must be paired with skill, discipline, and trust to become decisive. The Japanese side, by contrast, exemplified the perils of failing to adapt. Reliant on visual observation, optical targeting, and the proven effectiveness of long-lance torpedoes, they remained unprepared for an enemy who could strike unseen. Captain Kaju Sugiura, commanding Hajikes, dismissed warnings from experienced officers like Tamichi Hara. The results were catastrophic. The flagship Hajikes was engulfed in flames, Erasure crippled, and Kawakaze destroyed almost instantaneously. Only Shigeru managed to escape, emphasizing that skill alone could not overcome the combination of planning, coordination, and technological advantage. This failure highlighted a broader lesson for military organizations. Adherence to tradition without adaptation to new realities can be fatal, no matter how experienced the personnel may be. The aftermath of Vela Gulf solidified the role of radar in naval warfare. The battle validated SG radar as more than an auxiliary tool, it became central to operational planning. The success of the engagement led to the standardization of radar-guided torpedo tactics across the U.S. Navy, transforming night combat from a perilous guessing game into a precise and coordinated operation. Combat information centers emerged as critical hubs, translating raw sensor data into actionable commands that could guide multiple ships simultaneously. These innovations created a template that would dominate U.S. naval operations throughout the remainder of the Pacific Campaign, allowing American forces to operate effectively even in the absence of visual confirmation. Beyond immediate tactical gains, Vela Gulf had profound strategic consequences. The psychological impact on the Japanese fleet was significant. Recognizing the lethal potential of radar-guided attacks, Japanese commanders became increasingly cautious, avoiding night engagements unless they enjoyed numerical superiority. This shift granted the U.S. Navy freedom to control key sea lanes, execute supply missions, and plan larger offensives without the constant threat of surprise night attacks. The engagement exemplified how technological innovation, combined with decisive action, can alter the strategic environment, shaping not just the outcome of a battle but the conduct of an entire campaign. Vela Gulf also underscored the importance of recognizing unsung contributors in warfare. While commanders and ships often receive historical attention, the radar operators, CIC personnel, and torpedo crews who executed the mission with calm precision were equally crucial. Their training, discipline, and ability to interpret complex data ensured that the technology could be leveraged effectively. These individuals, though rarely credited, became the backbone of modern naval operations. The engagement demonstrated that innovation relies not only on machines but on the people who operate them, interpret information, and act decisively under pressure. The legacy of the battle extended to the broader evolution of naval doctrine. By proving that night engagements could be won without visual contact, the Americans forced a re-evaluation of tactics across fleets and theaters. The integration of radar, centralized coordination, and pre-planned torpedo strikes became standard practice, influencing operations in the Solomon Islands, the Philippines, and beyond. This doctrinal shift reflected a broader principle applicable to modern warfare: the combination of technology, intelligence, and disciplined execution can decisively shape outcomes even against a previously dominant opponent. The Battle of Vela Gulf thus became a teaching point for military planners, emphasizing adaptability, innovation, and the human dimension in the successful application of new systems. Key figures from the engagement became emblematic of these lessons. Commander Moosbrugger's leadership, decisiveness, and willingness to embrace new tactics earned him promotions and solidified his reputation as a pioneer in radar-guided operations. Tamichi Hara, who survived the battle, chronicled the Japanese perspective in his memoir Japanese Destroyer Captain, providing valuable insight into the consequences of doctrinal rigidity and the challenges of adapting under pressure. Captain Sugiura's fate, later killed aboard the cruiser Haguro by radar-guided British destroyers, illustrated the continuing consequences of underestimating technological evolution. Together, these individuals personified the human dimensions of strategic success and failure in wartime innovation. Commemoration of Vela Gulf is as much about honoring lessons as it is about celebrating victory. Museums and historical records often focus on ship movements and casualty counts, but the real story lies in the interplay of innovation, preparation, and execution. Radar units, once cutting-edge instruments, now largely absent from museum displays, were crucial to the outcome. CICs, the nerve centers of coordination, highlight the importance of systems integration in modern combat. Recognizing the contributions of operators and crews, often overshadowed by more visible acts of heroism, ensures that history honors both technological and human achievement. In the broader context, Vela Gulf serves as a paradigm of how warfare evolves. Technological advantage alone does not guarantee success, it must be integrated with training, coordination, and doctrine. Human skill and adaptability remain central, even in an age of sophisticated sensors and long-range weaponry. The battle's lessons continue to resonate in modern naval strategy, reminding planners and commanders that innovation must be matched by trust, discipline, and effective implementation. It also emphasizes that legacy is measured not only in ships sunk or lives saved but in the enduring influence on doctrine, tactics, and the mindset of future generations. Ultimately, the Battle of Vela Gulf stands as a symbol of transformation. It ended Japanese night supremacy, validated the power of radar, and demonstrated that innovation, when embraced and properly executed, can reshape the course of conflict. The engagement is a reminder of the profound interplay between technology and human capability, and of the importance of recognizing those whose skill and dedication make victory possible. For historians, strategists, and students of naval warfare, Vela Gulf is more than a tactical encounter, it is a testament to the enduring lessons of adaptability, foresight, and the courage to embrace change in the crucible of war.